Welcome back to Three Queens Cuisine. What we're going to be doing today is Irish soda bread. So this one I've done a whole bunch of times. This is a great bread that you can make in home with very few ingredients. And trying it out for the first time, this is not a yeast bread. So if you're scared of yeast, if you've never used it, if you're not sure about it, don't even worry about it. This one is a yeast-free bread. So if you have an allergy to any kind of yeast or anything like that, really, or you just don't want to use it, you don't want to try it, you don't like the taste of it, you don't like how it turns out for you, it's difficult, whatever the case may be, this is a completely yeast-free bread. So we're going to make it today. And then what I'm going to do with it is after I make it, I'm going to use it to make a bread pudding. We're going to try something slightly different. We're going to use this for that instead and try it out and see how it turns out. So we're going to try something new and something old, and we're going to try it today. So let's talk about ingredients. We're going to need all-purpose flour, some sugar, baking powder, salt, and baking soda. So when not using yeast, you're going to see this combination a lot. Baking powder and baking soda, those are going to be your leavening agents. Leavening, you might ask, what might that be? That helps the bread to rise. So instead of using yeast, which takes several hours to sit and rest and proof and then this and all of that, you can have this done in about 10 minutes, I think the prep time is. So it's not even that much. We're going to use butter. I know that this recipe calls for caraway seeds and raisins. I'm not a huge fan of caraway seeds. If you want to use them, you can use them. But this bread is actually really great to do kind of any dried fruit alternatives that you like. So I'm using raisins. I prefer it with this bread. I think it comes out really great. I think it tastes great. So I prefer it with raisins. I've also done it without any added fruit of any sort. So if you decide that you want to just do it without the raisins, it does not change the bread at all. You can still use it without raisins as well. 2 eggs and a cup and a half of buttermilk. So this is something that if you don't have in the house, they actually sell packets that you can take regular milk, a certain amount, and then the packet, and it will actually turn it into buttermilk. There's also recipes out there of vinegar and lemon juice added to milk will make buttermilk. So that's a different episode, but we can try that one day. But if you don't have buttermilk, you can try it with those. I've never substituted without buttermilk. So if you try it without, let me know. So for the butter in this recipe, it's going to need to be cut into the flour, sugar, and our baking powder and soda mixture. So in order to do that, this one has been in the fridge. It's hard. Now, either what we could do is you can leave this out from the night before if you know you're going to do this. This is a bit spontaneous, so I decided I'm going to do this. You can either leave it out on your counter the night before so it gets soft, or if you're in this Florida weather like I am, you could probably leave it outside, but don't leave it for too long because I have a feeling this would just turn completely liquid. If you're not and you're still in the cold, what you can do is put this inside of a microwave-proof bowl and microwave it 10-15 second increments until it's softened. If it goes a little liquid, that's okay. Just make sure you scrape the bowl down. But this way, it'll be room temperature much quicker, and you don't have to worry about you can't make it that day. You still can just warm it slightly so it becomes softer and a lot easier to be able to put into the flour mixture. This butter that I'm using for this recipe is an unsalted sweet butter. Now, if you decided or that all you have is a salted butter, then the amount of salt that's in here is 1 teaspoon of salt. You're going to leave that out. If you're using salted butter, don't add extra salt. If you're using the sweet unsalted, add the salt. Otherwise, if you put the salted butter and the regular salt in there, it's gonna be way too salty. So just leave it out if you're using salted butter. If you've gotten it to the point where it's just soft enough, but close to slightly getting liquidy, take it out, let it sit. There's going to be heat in the bowl. It'll keep softening it. So this way, while you get everything else together and you start that process, you can let the butter continue to sit and melt, and then we can add it in. So we're going to talk a little bit about the equipment you might need for this. If you want to try and do it by hand and crumble the butter in, it might make it too soft and you might end up with something a bit more like biscuity than what we're going for. So this is a pastry dough cutter, blender. This one's a blender. I have a cutter, but this one's a blender. So these edges are all sharpened. So be careful when washing this and using this. This part is more blunt, has a handy dandy handle. So this way you can actually cut the butter in and leave it in small chunks. So that's going to help out with the bread being softer, more buttery, a different texture. So by hand, it might make it a little bit softer, maybe a little bit more crumblier because the heat from your hand is going to melt the butter. So if you don't have one, you can also use a fork for this. Try soften the butter a little bit more. This way it's just a little easier on your hand, but you can definitely use a fork for this. Or if you have a pastry blender, I keep saying cutter, blender, then use that instead. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to preheat our oven to 350 degrees. That usually takes about 10 minutes to preheat. So in that time, we're going to be able to put all the ingredients together, get everything blended, shaped, and formed, and on to the next step. So first we're going to start out with 4 cups of all-purpose flour. I always make it messy. Don't worry about it. It gets a little messy. It gets a little messy. Try and make it as even as you can. This way we get the even amount of 4 cups. Always a mess. We have 4 cups of flour. Then we're going to do 3 tablespoons of sugar. So now we're going to do 3 tablespoons of sugar. Quick cleanup break. 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of sugar. 1 tablespoon double acting baking powder. Here's my oven. Baking powder. 1 teaspoon of salt. Remember, if you're using the salted butter, do not add the extra salt. Spoon of salt. 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda. If you're not sure about it, 3/4 is just 3 of the 1/4 measurements. Try to make this also as flat as you can. Too much of each one and you might end up with a giant rise and it won't bake in the center as well. So try and get that one as flat as you can as well. All right. We're going to use our pastry cutter. We're just going to start mixing all of this together. This also helps if you want to do it this way before you put the butter in. It helps to coat this. So this way the butter doesn't stick to this as much. So to make it a little easier, what you can do is cut your 6 tablespoons of butter into smaller chunks. So this way, when you add it bit by bit, take a small piece, you can add it into the flour, you can slowly cut that in. Once it looks like that has been added, you can throw in another piece or two. If it's all soft enough, you can throw them all in, but this is one way that you can do it, is to slowly do it tablespoon by tablespoon, chunk by chunk. If you want to do it even into smaller pieces, you can cut them into halves or little cubes as well, if you're not sure how hard your butter is going to be. So you can do it of various ways, just as long as it gets cut into the flour. That's what we're looking to do. I'm going to add in the last few chunks of mine because it is all soft enough. All that little clicking you hear going on, that's the dog wandering the house, so pay him no mind. So we're looking for coarse crumbs. Sorry for all the silence in between all this. I'm reading the recipe at the same time while doing this. I want to make sure that nothing got stuck to the bottom of the bowl as far as butter goes. And you can use the sides to help scrape in any flour that you need to, any butter. So now we have our coarse crumbs with our butter added into our flour, and you can see that the butter didn't really stick to it, except that one small piece, but it didn't really stick to it, so that makes it easier. Don't stick your fingers in between here when stuff sticks like this. You can use the knife or something else, but these edges are all sharpened, so be careful when putting your fingers there. At this point, we're going to take, we have at least 1 cup of raisins, and we're going to do a 1/2 cup. I don't want to dirty another measuring cup, so I'm going to eyeball it to about a 1/2 cup. That's the only good thing about this too, is that if you decide to go a little over, no worries. It really, honestly, does not change the recipe. So we're going to do about a 1/2 cup. So 1 1/2. Do not use the pastry cutter. You will completely demolish all of your raisins. So at this point, we're just going to do this by hand. We're going to coat the raisins. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but when you're doing chocolate chip cookies, I've always done it as well, that you leave the chocolate chips in a small portion of the flour that's going into the recipe. The flour coats the chocolate chips and prevents them from sinking down to the bottom. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to work these into the dough that we have going so far. Our raisins, if they're stuck together, just break them apart a little bit. If they stay in chunks, they stay in chunks. That's okay too. We're just going to break them up as much as we can. Get them all nice and coated in the flour. And this will prevent them from sinking to the bottom of the pan in our bread. This way also, they won't burn. They're not at the very bottom of the pan sitting against the metal. They're not going to burn. They have sugars, so that caramelizes, but when it's left too long, it goes to burning point. So in order to prevent that, we're going to take this time to coat our raisins as best as we can, breaking them up a little bit as we go. They'll break up a little bit more once you get the flour kind of pushed in between them a little bit, stirring them up. They'll break up a bit more. And then this way, from here, what we can do is continue on to our wet ingredients. Okay, we have all of our dry ingredients together. I'm going to push that off to the side for a second. Wet ingredients. A lot of recipes, especially for certain types of breads or doughs, will call for the dry and wet ingredients to be made separately and then blended together at a certain point in time. This way you don't get this giant mesh of mess everywhere. So, 2 eggs, crack them in. Just double check your eggs, since we're not really doing it like a mixer way where we can check it and see if it's okay. You can still check your eggs separately if you want to. You can use another measuring cup that we've used previously. Crack open an egg, double check it, make sure you don't get any kind of shells in there. If it looks good, you add it to the other bowl. And now what we're going to do is we're going to measure out 1.5 cups of buttermilk. Buttermilk is also good to shake it when you're going to use it. So give it a good shake. And now we're going to measure out 1.5 cups. This time I did get out the half cup measure, mostly because with the wet ingredients, you do need to be accurate with this part. So we're going to do 1, and we're going to do a half cup. In our bowl, off to the side, we're going to do that way. So now we're going to mix these two together. I'm going to get a spatula, scrape out those bowls. We need all of that. We're going to scrape all that buttermilk out because we need all of this moisture that's going to help bring the bread together. Dog is around again. I used a bit of a smaller bowl. I'm going to go get a bigger bowl. All right, bigger bowl, problem solved. So now we're going to mix this together. Just be careful you don't splash it everywhere. We need this liquid. So we're going to try and get it as thoroughly mixed together as we can. All right, so before we add this into our bread mixture, I should say our dry ingredients, what we're actually going to do, we are going to take about a tablespoon, that's our big guy here, and we're going to reserve some. Why might you ask? Because we're going to be doing an egg wash. The egg wash is going to help us get that nice coloring on the outside. So we're going to take about a tablespoon. We're going to reserve that. Now, scrape that down. Get everybody out of that. So we have our reserve, our tablespoon, off to the side. Our main mixture is here with our eggs and our buttermilk. So now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into our flour mixture. You can drizzle it around, help it. We're going to incorporate this just until it becomes a ball. Make sure you get everybody out of there. Like I said, we need all this moisture because this is going to be, our eggs are going to be our binder. So at this point in time, not the pastry cutter or the blender, we're going to be using a spatula. Now you can see this is getting thick very quickly. All that flour is going to absorb all that buttermilk and all those eggs. So we're going to keep mixing this together until we get it blended enough. Again, sorry for the silence. So now we've gotten it to the point where everything has been moistened completely. The dough is sticky. So now's the point where we're going to have to take it and knead this on a floured surface. So we are now at the point we're gonna roll this out. I happen to have a very large cutting board. If you don't, and all you have is your surface of your cabinets, that is fine too. You can use the countertop. Make sure you give it a good cleaning before you turn this out on there. Now, when it comes to the flouring, we're not talking, throw down a whole cup of flour. Very, very little flour. Make sure your hands are clean. I'm still using for baking. So we're gonna take a very small amount, and we're just gonna sprinkle that down, just enough so that the board won't become sticky. You can spread it around using your hand. You can see how much you might need a little bit more, or if it looks good, you can just leave it. I'm throwing down a little more. So now we're gonna take our dough. You can see how well it is bound together. So we're gonna slowly pour this out. Don't let it thump everywhere, just because you don't want to lose any of your dough. We're gonna make sure we scrape out everything. Pardon the noise. He's mad about nothing. So we're gonna scrape everything out. You can see that it's somewhat sticky, but at the same time, it's still giving us a crumble. So we're gonna put these two off to the side. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna bring this together. Yes, it's going to be sticky. What you can do is take a little bit of flour from here, place it on top, put it between your hands, roll them around, get them a little coated. Start kneading it together. Just be careful if you are putting different types of dried fruit in here. If it is a little bit softer, it may squish around and release some liquid. So just be careful. We're just gonna make sure we keep everybody together. Knead it up nicely so you can bunch it, flip it, press. Bunch it, flip it, press. This way, we're getting everybody worked in. Any flour or raisins that try to escape, bring them back in, pinch it, flip it, press. So about 10 strokes or so, depending on the weather, plays a lot of tricks on this. So if you're in a bit more of a humid area, it seems to be a little too sticky, you can always give it a little bit more attention just until it's able to hold its shape. So we are going to have it be in the shape of a ball. So we're just gonna keep pressing it a little bit more. And now we're gonna shape it. Shape it into a ball, try to get all that excess dough off your hands. It's a lot less stickier than it was when it was in the bowl, so you know that you've kneaded it well. Make sure anybody tries to get away gets put in. Shape it into a ball. And now it's time to put it into our pan. So now we're talking about a nice round pan. So as it expands, it'll go up the sides. You'll get a nice crust on the outside and then on the top. Now, for greasing, we could do two things. We could either do a vegetable spray, butter spray, something like that, or we could do regular butter. So this time around, I'm gonna do regular butter. I've done it with the spray. It also comes out well. So we're gonna use some of the leftover butter from our melted butter. And we're just gonna grease it. Now, we're not gonna dump the whole thing in. What you can do is take little bits at a time and slowly grease it. So this way, we get the bottom completely. And this you can just use your hands for. So it's just a light coating. It's nothing too much. We're gonna do a little bit up the sides as well. So we're gonna get some more butter. And we're just gonna start at the side. Just kind of work our way around with it. Again, we're just doing a light coating. We're not doing anything too heavy. Just gonna coat all the way around. So this way, as it climbs up the pan, it will be able to come out, but then we'll also get a nice coating on the outside. So we're just gonna move all of that around, get it nice and going. So now our pan is greased. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take our bread mixture that we've left sitting on the counter just for a moment. We're gonna take it, make sure it stays in that ball shape, plop it in. Shoot for the center. If you miss it, that's okay. You can always kind of move it around. So now it's inside of our pan. We have it, it's there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cut a 1/4 inch cross. Now, I'm not one for measuring very well, so what I usually do is I just do it by eye, and I take it, and you can just use a sharp knife, kind of cut down slightly, turn it. We're going to cut slightly again, so this way you end up with an X across, however you want to call it. So we're going to end up with that. Simple, easy. Take the knife, cut down, take the knife, cut down. This is not going to be as sticky as other doughs, so the knife won't get stuck in there. So we're just going to kind of, you can kind of pull it apart here and there to make it a little bit more noticeable. Stretch it open, and that's it. So now what we're going to do, if you remember what we did, we reserved the eggs and buttermilk. So now what we're going to do is, if you don't have one, which I don't think I do either, you don't have a brush to add it into, whoops, just take a spatula, mix it up, just kind of slightly spread it on. Don't push too hard because then you might close that cross up. We don't want that. We want to make sure that this egg wash is going to go on to provide a nice outer coating, help the bread to go brown a little bit more. And what I like to do is, once I have it like that, I pour it inside of the center area. So that way the inner part also will get a nice coating going. You can just kind of pour it around the rest of it. And then just make sure even the sides are slightly coated. Bring it around like that. If it seems like there's too much inside of the bread there, just kind of open up that area a little bit. It'll drain out. So we're just gonna spread that around that way. And that's it. Guys, I've just made bread. So now we're going to put this in the oven for 1 hour and 20 minutes. We're going to cool this then in the pan for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to cool completely on a rack. Again, if you guys are using a different type of stove, I would just say keep your eye on it. I'm using the electric stove. I did set it for 1 hour and 10 minutes, but I'm going to check on it, especially closer to when it hits 1 hour, only because I want to see, with my oven, it has a tendency to kind of slightly overbake. So we're going to keep our eye on that to make sure that the bread just gets nice and soft and toasted and not burnt on the bottom. Guys, we've been in the oven now for, well, right now my countdown is at 3407. So we've been in there for a good amount of time. And look how much it's risen. It's starting to get golden brown. Everything's staying nice inside of the pan. It's all going good. Quick update. There it is. After the 1 hour and 10 minutes in a 350-degree oven, nice and golden brown from the egg wash. We're going to leave it sit in the pan for a little while. Then we're going to turn it out and let it cool on a surface till it's completely cooled. All right, we've let it cool in the tray for 10 minutes. Now, it's still going to be hot, the pan, so oven mitts all the way. Hopefully, if we've coated it right, it should actually turn right out. We're going to turn this upside down. Be careful, and there you go. Came right out. You can see here, there's not too many raisins on the bottom, It's not burnt. So an hour and 10 minutes, and now top is nice golden brown. We're going to leave it on our tray to cool completely. And then this way, when it's cooled enough, we can cut this up and turn it into a bread pudding. There you go, guys. You've made Irish soda bread. That's all there is to it. Yeah, let me know if you guys do anything different, if you try a different type of fruit inside, maybe a nut, anything else that you might do differently. Let me know how it turns out. It turned out really well, even though we're in the Florida heat here. So enjoy, guys. Try making bread. That's it.